Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. Hard these days to be balanced. Seen the world so cold. Leaders barely being biblical. Boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know. All praise to the chief. One and only high priest. Son of God with the keys. Price of life ain't cheap. Paid in blood, not clean. Wanna cross over water, follow what he taught us, start walking. I'ma go build a bridge. Yeah, he said build a bridge. Lot of tensions on the sides, word be dividing truth from the fibs. Christ the light and it's lit. Time to go build a bridge. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, 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 bold. Papa said build a bridge, must subtract the division. Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. Hard these days to be balanced, seen the world so cold. Leaders barely being biblical, boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know, all praise to the chief. One and only high priest, son of God with the keys. Price of life ain't cheap, paid in blood, not clean. Wanna cross over water, follow what he taught us, start walking. I'ma go build a bridge. Yeah, he said build a bridge. Lot of tensions on the sides, word be dividing truth from the fibs. Christ the light and it's lit. Time to go build a bridge. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, keep it biblical for show. Teach it balance, preach it bold, 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 bold.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Bridge. I'm your host, Jesse Bailey, and tonight we are going to be talking about COVID. Yes, COVID. But before we get into that, just a couple reminders. This is designed to be a conversation here on The Bridge. So we want to encourage everybody to participate through sending in your text messages and being open to even calling in and being a part of the show. Keeping in mind our three objectives. Number one, we want to keep it balanced. This is why I want to invite the conversation from people who may have a different point of view. This way we all can learn and grow and expand our knowledge or understanding of not just the topics that we talk about, but the people that we're having the conversations with. So we want to keep it balanced. We also want to keep it bold. That means we're able to speak our minds and voice our opinions without feeling like we're going to be shunned or judged or bullied or anything like that. So we want to be bold with our thoughts and our feelings. And then lastly, and most importantly, we keep it biblical. I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that the Bible is the moral compass for the way we as human beings should live our life here on the earth. So we keep it from that worldview. With that said, I respect everybody's worldview, and I invite you to come in and share what that worldview is and your perspective of the topics that we talk about during this time. So as I said, I want it to be more conversation than just information. If it's just information, then that's just you absorbing more opinions and information and facts. And that doesn't always help us grow, and it certainly doesn't help build bridges. Bridges requires one side coming together with another side. So that means that we need to have a conversation. So I really encourage everybody, be a part of that. And here's how you do. If you want to call in and have a conversation live here on the air, I really encourage that, and I love that. So again, please make use of that phone number. So tonight we're going to be talking about COVID, just as I had said. So listen, there's so many different opinions, so many different thoughts going around about this, so many different theories, some of them conspiracy theories and what have you. But what I want to do tonight is not just present the same information that we've been hearing this whole time. I want to open up the conversation and present perspectives. Everybody has a different perspective and a reason why they feel a certain way about this. And I want to answer some questions to try and create the framework to looking at those perspectives. Because I think much like every other thing that we have in our life, we can go to a side, pick our corners, and then just hunker down and stay there. But this is something that's affecting everybody in the world. So sitting down in our bunkers isn't helping anything because people are still dying, people are still out of work, there's real stuff that's going on. So we have to come together and talk and have discussions about what's going on. Number one, so we can gain greater understanding of each other, like I said, because there's a lot of disagreement. I don't even want to say division, because division means I'm not talking to you. So if you're unfriending people and doing that kind of stuff, that's not helpful. You don't share my opinion, so I'm going to unfriend you and never talk to you again. That's not mature. It's certainly not godly. We got to stop doing that, family. We got to start loving each other. What we have is disagreements, and that's okay. It's okay to have disagreements. I have a ton of brothers and sisters. I have disagreements with them, and it doesn't matter. We're still family. We still love one another. So we have to be able to do that in a mature and loving way. So tonight, let's have an open heart and open mind and begin to answer some of these questions with that framework in mind. So without dilly-dallying anymore, let's get right into it. Now, tonight I'm gonna pull the opinion. We're gonna be watching some clips off of a particular gentleman, Dr. David Katz, who recently did an interview with Bill Maher. Now, I think I said this in one of my previous episodes, but I'm really surprised at how much I'm in agreement with Bill Maher's perspective. For those of you who don't know who Bill Maher is, he's a leftist, atheist, very outspoken comedian who has his own show that slams Christianity, doesn't like conservatism at all. However, over the last couple months, he's been speaking at a level that seems to line up a little bit more with conservative thinking, even though he's not a conservative per se. So it's just been a very interesting to watch his kind of a transition in his thoughts. So I'm going to play some clips from a recent interview that he did, simply because it involves two people who have a different point of view from me, but the same perspective when it comes to dealing with the COVID crisis that we're in right now. So having said COVID crisis, I want to address the first question that I think needs to come first and foremost is COVID a hoax? No. COVID is not a hoax. And if something's a hoax, that means it's completely false, it's untrue, and it's an elaborate scheme to completely deceive. It's not a hoax because it's actually a real sickness. There's actually real people that are sick. I know people dear to me who have been sick with this disease. So is COVID a hoax? Is it a big thing? They're just making all this stuff up like some really, really extreme people are saying? No, it's not a hoax. We can't say that. That's really inappropriate, and it's an offense to people who have lost people because of this. No, COVID-19 is an actual disease. It is a sickness that is infecting people, and people have died from it. Now, where people say this is a hoax, that it more comes from the fact, and I'm trying to bring it back towards the middle ground here, is that most people don't believe that the way it's being portrayed and the response to it is as necessary as the disease itself mandates. That's where people are coming from when they say this is a hoax. And we have to be able to distinguish, what we mean by saying a hoax. Because when you say this is a hoax, it's all a sham. Well, again, say that to the people who have actually lost someone, and say that to the people who are out of work. All those things that are going on right now. So no, it's not a hoax. But are we handling it properly? We'll have to see. We'll have to see. I think as time goes on, more and more is being revealed on how we can handle it, how we could have handled it better, some things that we did really well. But the most important thing is, where are we now, and are we doing the right things now, given the information? Again, when this thing came out, remember, this was a novel virus. This is something that we hadn't really dealt with, and it spread very quickly on a larger scale. Now, a lot of people would make the argument, well, so does the flu. True, and many doctors are admitting that yes, this is more flu-like than they had originally thought, but nonetheless, people are still passing away. So we just got to let that be what it is. So yes, COVID is a real thing. It's something that we have to look at. It's something that we have to deal with. So we're going to get into some of those other specifics about it right now. So the next question I wanted to address is why is this such a big deal? I mean, we've had outbreaks in the past. We've had certain things going on. But why is this such a big deal right now? I mean, why is this so polarizing? We've never seen the level of polarization surrounding a disease before. Why is that? So that's what I want to spend the bulk of our time on tonight. We're going to talk about the church. Is the church being persecuted? We're going to talk about all those things. But I really want to talk about, why is this such a big deal? The number one reason it's such a big deal is because for the first time in dealing with something like this, we are being asked to step out of life as we know it. Our life as we know it has been completely interrupted. And that makes us uncomfortable. We don't like that. We don't like change. And just being honest, as human beings, we don't like being told what to do. We're rebellious in our nature. We don't like somebody saying, hey, you can do this and you can't do that. That's why we resist ordinances that come out. Heck, that's why most people resist God. They resist God because they don't want, a supreme being telling them what they can and cannot do. Because there's this feeling of, I want to be in control. I want to do what I want to do. It's rebellion. So that's why it's a big deal, is because we're actually being said, no, you can't go to work. No, you can't go to the beach. No, you can't do this. Yes, you have to wear a mask. And we don't like that. We just have to admit, whether you're okay with it or you're not okay with it, let's just all be okay with the fact that deep down in our hearts, as human beings, we don't like being told what to do. So that's probably the biggest reason why this is such a big deal. It was a lot of rules and regulations that came at us really fast and had a huge impact on us. And I think regardless of what side of the fence you're on this, I think we can all agree on that and say, yeah, this has really impacted our lives in a not so positive way on the outside. So we want to deal with that first. So yes, this has had a big impact on us. Now, some of the other reasons that I believe it's had a big impact, it's a big deal, and it's so polarizing, is because of different mindsets that people approach it with. I'm going to do a whole show just on group thinking and mindsets, because it's so fascinating to see that certain people that feel a certain way all think the same way about certain things. So, for example, if you support Black Lives Matter, then you're also all about putting on a mask. Haven't you found that to be true? If people who support Black Lives Matter are all about you got to wear a mask also. Why do we think that way? How does that equate? How is that true? And they all seem to be left-leaning. The Democratic, vote on that platform, 90%, probably more. You vote Democratic, you want to wear a mask, you support Black Lives Matter, and all this stuff. It's like, whoa. How is it that we think the same way on all those? And on the other side, too. If you're conservative, then you hate masks, you think our rights are being stolen away, and you think Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. By the way, you're right. It is. So that's a whole other separate issue. But there is this polarizing condition that we're seeing in our nation right now. So that's why it's a big deal. The other reason it's a big deal is because we've never dealt with this before. So we're getting information that seems to be true now, but it's not as true later. It's not as accurate. There's a lot of discrepancies. So we're just going to break down, what's been going on and how we've dealt with it, and what are some of these big issues that we're looking at. So the first thing I want to talk about was the initial goal of the lockdown, the masks, and everything that came out. There's a lot of conflicting information that came out. Back in March, you had, I think it was March, we had Dr. Fauci coming out and saying, no, everybody doesn't need to wear a mask. It's not gonna really help. It's not gonna really stop anything. And then later on, he says, nope, we all got to wear masks. Everybody's got to wear masks. So there was a shift. Maybe he found out something new. I mean, this is a guy, 40+ year doctor. He's high up. You would think that he would know if masks are useful or not. So why the switch? Why the pivot? Okay, we'll talk about masks in a little bit. We're saying, okay, well, we just need to flatten the curve. We need to flatten the curve. And it changed from flattening the curve to now we got to be on lockdown until we see the numbers drop and we get a vaccine. People talking about we're not going back to normal until we get a vaccine. So wait a minute. You went from flattening the curve so that we make sure that the hospitals don't get overwhelmed, which has never happened. You could say that's because of what we did, or it just was never going to happen. Either way, doesn't matter. It didn't happen. To now, we see the hospitals here in LA, 40%, most of them. In other places, they're getting close to 100% capacity, but there's a reason why people are running into the hospitals. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you're just seeing all this teeter-tottering between different opinions and different thoughts. Now, we got to be honest. Some of that is just because the people who are dealing with this never dealt with it before. They don't know. They don't know. But when you have this back and forth, it makes people feel uneasy. It's like, man, do we have any solid answers on this? Do we know anything about what we're dealing with? Well, the answer to that is yes now. But I want to talk about that whole idea of flattening the curve as an initial response. I've been saying this just in my private conversations. It's like, look, when this first came out, absolutely, we got to do whatever it takes because we don't know the level of impact that it's going to have. So you got to take every precaution. I mean, that's a wise thing to do. We close our borders. We lock down a little bit. We wait to see what's going on. That is a wise thing to do. By the way, it's a little funny that the same people that are saying this is all a hoax and we shouldn't wear masks and we shouldn't do all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that you're right or wrong. I'm just pointing out the kind of the hypocrisy. When we say all that, and then when Donald Trump gets blasted for how he handled it, whether right or wrong, we want to run to his defense and say, no, he did everything right. It's kind of funny. I'm like, wait a minute. How are you saying he did everything right, but then at the same time we don't believe that this is really as bad as it is? You gotta pick a side here. You can't just say this because it's a conservative, message. We gotta be consistent. So I just think that that's something that's funny. I wanted to throw out there. So let's talk about flattening the curve. Yes, when we initially do that, we want to flatten the curve. But one of the things that myself and again, I'm no doctor. I don't have a medical degree or anything like that. I haven't spent extensive time studying the human anatomy or anything like that. However, I also have common sense. I have common sense, and I think that is definitely applicable in situations like this. We have the experts, but we also have common sense. I don't need to have a certificate on my wall and a degree to know dog poop when I smell it. And you just smell some stuff. Everybody would have to admit there's just something a little off about how things are being dealt with this late in the game now. So to kind of talk about this a little bit more extensively, I want to bring up a clip here. And this is Dr. David Katz on the Bill Maher Show, and he's addressing some of these issues. Now, I want to preface all these clips with this, that this is property of Bill Maher and his show, all rights reserved. I'm not using this for any financing purposes or anything. And then I also want to give this disclosure. I am using clips, but I invite you to watch the entire interview. It's only about 15 minutes, but I'm only doing clips just because it's relevant to what we're talking about. I'm not cherry picking anything. You can see the whole thing in its entirety. So with this, I just wanted to bring up what Dr. Katz says about flattening the curve. So let's take a look.
Essentially what flattening the curve does is keeps people away from one another and away from the virus. So the virus doesn't spread, but you also don't cultivate any immunity. If you do a really effective job of locking everybody in place and preventing viral transmission, there's still some low-level potential for viral exposure out in the world, but very few of us get that exposure. The minute you release those clamps and let people back into the world, we're all vulnerable. So most of the models suggest that flattening the curve makes sense in phase 1 so you don't overwhelm medical systems, for example. But you've got to have a phase 2. If you don't transition to a phase 2, whenever you release the clamps, the virus is out in the world waiting for you. Everybody's vulnerable, and that big peak in cases and that big peak in deaths that you were trying to avoid really just happens at a later date.
All right. Let me turn the echo off here. So here we have Dr. Katz, and in the context of that, he's talking about the initial idea of flattening the curve, which makes total sense. But what he's saying is if you just focus on flattening the curve the whole time and you isolate everybody and you never give them the opportunity to be exposed to it, then you're just holding back the inevitable. You're holding back what's going to happen because at some point this thing is going to come out. So you put ourselves in a position where we either deal with this and let herd immunity kick in, or we hunker down and let our economy completely be destroyed while we wait for a vaccine, which, by the way, I'm not trusting what they're putting in it anyway. We're going to have a whole talk about vaccines. And let me just say this so I'm not just throwing stuff out there. I believe that the idea of vaccinations, immunology, all of that is valid. I think it's a great science. So it's not the idea of introducing a weakened virus into our body so we can build the antibodies and get stronger. I believe in that 100%. They did it with polio. It's wonderful. My problem with it is the whole Trojan horse of presenting something great, but inside you have some nasty stuff that doesn't belong there, like fetus parts and all these different weird things that they're going into this stuff that I don't particularly want in my body or anyone else's, and the potential side effects. So it's either allow God's system where immunity kicks in and we are able to build up the antibodies, we get it, we overcome it, and then we're stronger, or we wait for a vaccine. The only thing about vaccines is look, we've had flu vaccines for years, and every year they keep giving us vaccines. But guess what? People are still dying. In 2018, over 80,000 people died in America. And that's the middle ground number. 80,000 people died in America of just the regular flu, and that's with a flu shot. So does that really work? I don't know. We'll talk about that at a later time. But this whole idea of flattening the curve, but then now you're trying to lock everybody down, and what he's saying is once you let everybody out, the same thing's going to happen. At some point, we have to let it move its way through our society. And that's what he's really saying about it. Let's watch this next clip and listen to what what he says. It's very important. Remember, this is not a conservative guy. This is a well-respected doctor. He got his degrees from Yale and the Einstein University for medical science. He's well-respected by his colleagues. So this isn't some guy who's just on the bandwagon here. Let's check out this next one.
So, for example, we just heard there's widespread testing in New York. I think Governor Cuomo's doing a great job there. And it looks like at least 20% of the population of New York may have antibodies. Well, that's close to 4 million people. And what that means is the death toll in New York, tragic though it is, and again, all these deaths are real people, and my condolences to the families. But just looking at the statistics for a minute, 20,000 deaths out of 4 million people, that's 0.5%. We're starting to see that the mortality toll of this, when you get the denominator, is really small. And I think the denominator is even bigger than that. So we're not totally blind. Yeah, I think we do have to fly in a bit of a fog, but we're not flying totally blind.
All right. So in this segment, he's talking about the effects of people actually contracting the virus. So what they're finding now in New York, and this is from a couple weeks ago, but they have over 20% antibodies now within the tested population. So they're saying that more people have gotten it than they realized, and they now have the antibodies for it. And in respect to loss of life versus population, they're at 0.5%, and that number keeps going down because they're discovering that more people actually had it, and so it throws the numbers off. And again, just like Dr. Katz said, we mourn for every single life that was lost. I almost lost a friend through this. I know people who have lost family members. So we have to acknowledge that, and we have to be sensitive to that. Yes, this is real, and this is impacting people. However, we have to look at both ends of the spectrum here. We have to look at the personal experience, and we have to console and be compassionate towards those who have lost. But when it comes to making decisions for the greater good of the nation, we have to look at the numbers and statistics. We have to have both perspectives. So we can look at the individual, but then look at the overall impact that this is having on us as a nation. So when we see numbers that are in less than 0.5% in terms of overall mortality, that's not as widespread as we thought it would be. So the flattening of the curve has helped. The hospitals have not been overwhelmed. The United States of America is actually shipping ventilators and all these things to people around the world and providing aid to people. So we managed this well, in my opinion. I feel we managed it well. There's lots of reasons why we may have bigger numbers. More people travel in and out of the United States of America. We have more people coming internationally. We're a huge melting pot. We have lots of different factors why it may have hit us. But on the whole, we've done a good job containing it and flattening that curve. But what the doctor was saying in that previous clip is that at some point we have to let people get exposed to it. Let me share this clip with you guys so you can hear the numbers just surrounding the number of people that have been exposed and what needs to happen next. So let's just listen to this.
There's a middle path, and the middle path essentially is high-risk people are protected from exposure, low-risk people go out in the world early. And here's the odd part, Bill, that I think people have a hard time confronting and accepting. We actually kind of want to get this and get it over with and be immune, because that is the path to the all clear that doesn't require us to wait for a vaccine, which optimistically is 18 months away, but could be much longer.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of sense there. And I think it's a shame, you're talking about politicization, that people like you who sound reasonable, maybe it's not the exact one true opinion you hear somewhere else, has to go on Fox News to say it. You're not a Fox News guy.
I'm not a Fox News guy, but on the other hand, I am a bridges, not bunkers guy, and it doesn't really help the world if all we ever do is talk to other people who already own our opinions. It was interesting. I really debated, do I go on Fox News? Do I not? That's not my usual crowd. But the simple fact is, we should come together in common cause on common ground. Maybe there's a real opportunity here for an aha American moment that's between the extremes of left and right, where we all say, yeah, actually, we want to save as many lives as possible. And, one of the interesting things, Bill, is it's sort of the left side of the spectrum, the liberal ideology that seems to be so resistant to talking at all about unemployment and the economy. But that's the very same camp that tends to appreciate that the single leading driver of bad health outcomes is poverty. Social determinants of health are massively important. So, frankly, 30 million people unemployed, that falls disproportionately hard on the people who can least bear the unemployment,
Right.
who are at most risk of food insecurity,
Yes,
who are at
poverty.
most risk of depression, addiction. All of that's important too. So maybe there's a real opportunity here to say, hey, there's a middle path, we've been neglecting it. It's the way through this thing, and it leads to total harm minimization. We want to minimize deaths and severe cases of the infection. We also want to minimize the fallout, the health fallout of societal collapse and economic ruin.
That doctor is dropping some truth. He's dropping some truth. So what he's talking about here is that we have to consider all aspects of how this is affecting life. One of the things, and I'm just going to be honest, one of the things that's really bothered me is that when you take a position and say, hey, we need to start fighting for herd immunity. I don't think we need to lock down so much. We need to let people out so they can be exposed to it. I keep getting called selfish. I'm like, and people who think like me, why am I selfish? Because I'm also thinking about not just those who are being exposed to this, but I'm also thinking about the families who can't work, who can't eat, who can't provide for their children. Isn't it selfish to not think about them? I mean, here's an analogy. Let's say I'm allergic to peanut butter. If I get peanut butter in my system, I could actually die from it. So now I tell everybody, look, no restaurants can serve peanut butter. Grocery stores can't sell peanut butter. And I don't want anybody eating peanut butter. And all the peanut farms and all the peanut factories have to be shut down because me and a percentage, about 0.5% of our nation is allergic to peanut butter. So shut it all down. And you know what? You're selfish if you think that me and the 0.5% of people who are like me, who are impacted by this, aren't worth shutting down your family's livelihood. What kind of sense does that make? And look, I don't want anyone to die. But I also don't want families to lose their homes and that has a cascading effect on our economy and on people's lives. I mean, we're seeing suicide increase like crazy. We're seeing people turn to drugs and alcohol. We're seeing domestic violence increase during this time because of the stress of not having finances, not being able to go to work, not being able to handle these things. What about those lives? I actually think it's more selfish to say, hey, I'm part of a small percentage of people who could be impacted by this, but yet and still I want an entire nation, yet an entire world to shut down because of me. That is selfish. And I'm just being real. I really that really bothers me that people start throwing labels and stuff like that. No, it's not selfish. We're just thinking beyond our feelings. We're thinking beyond just our personal experience. Now look, if those who are close to me had passed away, yes, that would hurt. But I'll be honest, my perspective wouldn't change about how we deal with it because the two aren't directly related. I'm sad that these individuals had this, but I'm also aware of the global impact. We got to be able to think beyond what's right in front of our eyes and think about the greater good, the global good, the good of our nation and all families and people who are being impacted by this in a variety of ways. And that's what Dr. Katz is talking about, is that the economic impact on people is devastating, especially in those low-income communities where things are being shut down. They already have a hard time having access to healthcare and all these different things because the money's not there. And then we're going to take even more money away by not allowing them to work. It just doesn't make sense to shut down the entire economy. And that's reasonable. What scares me is that we have politicians and people in leadership that can't understand that. That can't understand that, wait a minute, this is going to have a far-reaching effect on everyone. And I'm going to say this, they all lean left. I mean, when we look at some of the numbers, and look, I'm being balanced, but truth is truth. Truth is truth. When you see the highest number of cases and deaths and all these different things come from a particular areas that are run by a particular side of the aisle, it is something that we have to pay attention to. It's just interesting. It's just interesting. So why is this a big deal? One, the whole flattening of the curve thing and the way it's being handled, I don't think it's correct. I think, like Dr. Katz said, we need to move out of that phase. We have to start letting people get back to normal. And the way we do it is that middle ground he was talking about. And I've talked about this with a ton of people, and everybody's calling me selfish. No, look, it just makes sense. If, going back to the peanut butter analogy, if I'm allergic to peanut butter, then it's my responsibility to make sure I don't eat it. I have a son who is allergic to peanut butter. He's allergic to peanuts. He has a severe allergic reaction to it. But guess what? I still have peanut butter in my home. We've just learned how to keep him away from it. And he's 15 years old now, been doing good. And not only that, but his allergy to it is weakening. He's getting stronger. That's a great thing because he takes care of himself. That's something else that we're going to talk about. But the idea here and the principle here is this, that we take care of those who are most susceptible to it. We take care of those who are most susceptible to it. And then we allow everybody else to go about life as normal. Well, I have my grandmother that lives in the home with me. Then we take precautions. Maybe you wear a mask everywhere. You know? Maybe you work from home. We make provisions for that. We make rules and laws and provisions so that people can do that as it pertains to you. See, the problem here is that America is based on the rule of law and that we have to protect our freedoms. The role of the government is not to, lord over my health and what they think is best for me and my family. Your job, American government, is to protect my rights to make my decisions for my family. That's your job. You don't get to come in and tell me what's healthy for my family. Now, there's certain degrees to that. I don't want to make just a blanket statement because we do have to have laws, because when people are being neglectful and all that, then absolutely. So we have to determine, are we really being neglectful? If I want to go to the beach with my family on the 4th of July and run around in the open air with a breeze, is it reasonable to say you can't do that given the information that we now have about COVID? Absolutely not. And there are many, many doctors who agree. So this brings up one of the other reasons why it's such a big deal, is that it doesn't smell right. I said it earlier, something doesn't smell right. Something doesn't smell right. You're playing on people's fears. You're pumping this up and making a big deal about it. Everybody's afraid of it. Everybody's afraid of it. I've talked to so many nurses and friends of mine who work in the hospitals, and I have a friend whose son works for the fire department, and I was having a conversation with him. I was saying, hey, have you seen an uptick in cases? You guys going out? What does it look like out there? I mean, what's going on? And he said, yes, we've seen more people calling in for COVID. I was like, oh, wow. I said, how many of these people are in really bad shape because of it? He said, almost none of them. He said the only calls that he's gotten, and again, this is just a small portion. This is a guy who's 3 days on in the fire department and 4 days off. So I realize that it's just a small pocket of the population. But we can listen to people who have experience in dealing with all these things. This gentleman, he goes to lots of different places. He talks to his friends. And what he was saying is, what we're seeing is that most of the people who are really impacted by this are those who are already sick, have pre-existing conditions, or are older. He said a lot of the times when we get calls for COVID, we're taking people to the hospital and they're staying there, but they're letting them go because they're more panicking than anything. He said people are more worried about COVID and calling to go to the hospital than actually need to go to the hospital. So that's one of the interesting things about these numbers is that, yes, people are going to the hospital, but how many of them are going because they actually need to go to the hospital? We've been worked up into such a frenzy, we're afraid of it, and so the second you get a cough, the second you get anything, you're panicking and you run to the hospital. So that's not the right approach either. And I'll be honest, the media has been pumping this so much. It's one thing to make people aware of it, but it's another thing to incite fear. I mean, going back to 2018 when over 80,000 people died from the flu. What if they had posted, a tenth of those people who died? What if they were saying articles about that? This person dies of the flu. The entire church got the flu. I mean, our church has gotten the flu. You have one kid that comes in, parents aren't being responsible. They put him in the nursery and they didn't know they have a fever, and all of a sudden half the church has the flu. But we're not broadcasting it, and there are many people who have passed because of the flu. And it's usually the same people, those who are older, those who have a compromised immune system. And yes, it does impact some younger people from time to time. But on the whole, we're not running and panicking when we see those numbers, because it's not being put in front of our face all the time. So the fact that it's being put in front of our face all the time makes us wonder, what's really going on? Is there something behind this? Is there something more? Is this situation, which is real, it's not a hoax, but just because it's not a hoax doesn't mean that it cannot be exploited to the advantage of certain people. And I absolutely 100% believe that there is some exploitation going on. And we'll talk about reasons for that right here. So, number one, and this is more getting into theory. Again, I'm not stating anything as fact. I'm just sharing information. Let's look at the impact of what's going on and who could possibly benefit from it. And again, just putting it out there as potential theory, just having a conversation. Who benefits from the economy going south? And again, you can agree or disagree, that's okay, but I'm just going to put it out there. When we have a down economy, this is when the rich get richer. See, a down economy affects the middle class and the lower income people more than anyone, because we don't have the reserves. We don't have all that. But the rich people benefit from this. There are more millionaires made during recessions than there are during a booming economy. Why? Because when the recession is low, when the market goes down, that's when the rich people who have all the extra money, they have all the extra capital, they go in and they start buying up all these things at a very low rate. So then when the economy rebounds, they get richer. This is how the rich get richer. By allowing dips in the economy, then they buy everything up and then they come out richer. You read any financial book, anybody who follows the market, this is where millionaires are made. So the rich, the super rich, benefit from times like this. Absolutely. Who else would benefit from an economy like this? Well, let's say you have the greatest economy in the history of the nation underneath a president that you don't particularly like. Things are going real strong. Well, if the economy happens to go down as a result of this, and we can extend that, doesn't that make one of the strongest points of his presidency weaker as we go into an election year? Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And you would think, would someone be so diabolical that they would let these things happen? Read your history books. Yes, people are that diabolical. Look at slavery back in the day. That was diabolical and everybody was in on it. Look at communism. Responsible for over 150 million people dying. And they were all in on it. Absolutely, they would let that happen. We can't be so naive to think that there's not an evil out there that would allow people to suffer so that it can grow and gain. Absolutely, I believe that that is a possibility. Now, how else do you benefit from a collapsed economy? Well, if you want to control people, what do? You give them entertainment, you give them bread. It goes back to the Roman Empire. You guys may have read this already. It's floating around. The pathway to control is paved with dependency. Let me say it again. The pathway to control is paved with dependency. If you make a people dependent on you, then you can now control them. This is what we saw with the Great Society, with Lyndon Johnson. You start handing out welfare to everyone, and all of a sudden, you're the hero, and everybody does whatever you say. Lyndon Johnson said, I will make the black people, and he didn't use those words, the black people vote Democrat for 200 years. You can go back and watch our episode on systemic racism to hear all the quotes. But that's how you do it. That's how you control people. Create strong dependency. So if the economy is down and then we're going to come in and start giving money away, man, do you know how many people I've talked to who are just loving being on unemployment right now? Oh yeah, I'm just getting unemployment. I'm just chilling, making no effort to do anything. And not to say that they have something to do. I'm just not built like that. I believe what the Bible says. If you don't work, you don't eat. So I would be looking for an opportunity to work and get something done. That's what I have been doing during this time. Looking for greater opportunity to work and be of good use to the Lord and provide for my family. But when you get used to that, you get comfortable with that, you get comfortable with the handouts, then man, you start being lulled to sleep and you become dependent, and now you're easily manipulated and easily controlled, and you just do what the provider does. Do what the provider says. So there's absolutely a benefit to certain people in exploiting COVID. Not inventing it, but exploiting it. And I want to make sure that we talk about the difference there. Another reason this is a big deal, and I'll just throw it out there, questionable numbers. Questionable numbers. We've seen so many different numbers being thrown around. We've seen a mishandling of information on so many levels. From COVID tests picking up just regular flu, from COVID deaths going way up here, but all of a sudden regular influenza. And you can check the CDC. This is right on the CDC. Influenza deaths go down, but everything is COVID. The numbers don't add up. And I've heard personally from nurses and individuals who are in the hospitals who have looked and seen on reports with their own eyes that someone is marked as having COVID and they do not have COVID. There's no test that was given, nothing. They're just saying they have COVID. And I've heard this from multiple people in the hospitals. Multiple people. So if that's happening, just recently heard from somebody who their friend was way against COVID, conspiracy theories and all that, until a friend of theirs' child had passed away from an unrelated sickness, completely unrelated, passed away, and then they did the autopsy, and they said, oh, this child had COVID too, so they marked it as a COVID death. They said, wait a minute, they had no symptoms. They took their child and brought it to another doctor to do the autopsy. Said no, they didn't have COVID. There's no COVID at all. But the official autopsy was they died of COVID. And there's stories like this all over the place. Why are they so adamant about marking this? If you look at the contact tracing that's going on right now, so once you go and get tested, if they find out that anyone around you has had COVID, then they're constantly calling you. It's called contact tracing. They check, hey, do you have any symptoms? Do you have any symptoms? They'll call you like every day or a couple times a week, which is harassment as far as I'm concerned. Hey, do you have any symptoms? Do you have COVID? And if you say yes, yeah, I've got a runny nose, they're instructed to automatically mark you as having COVID. They automatically mark you as having COVID with no test. All they're asking is, do you have a fever? Do you have a runny nose? Do you have a cough? Do you feel shortness of breath? So if you say yes to any one of those things, they automatically put it in their system, their contact tracing system, that you have COVID, and now they can say, okay, you need to be quarantined for 14 days. That's how it's working. No test involved. Even if you had the test and it came back negative, if they in their system determine that you've come in contact with somebody that does have COVID or been around in the vicinity, and you say you have a runny nose, you are a COVID patient. So these numbers are skewed. Now, I understand we could say they're doing the best that they can. But it just seems odd to me. Something doesn't smell right. So, real quick, I'm going to go to another clip here, but I want to go here and hear from some people. It says, actually, the biggest reason this is such a big deal is because it's an election year. You know, I can't disagree. I can't disagree with that. Every election year, especially when it's a big one, we see stuff. I said back in 2017, after the 2016 election, I said, watch, we're not going to hear anything from Black Lives Matter until 2020. Sure enough, we heard nothing from Black Lives Matter in that whole movement until this year. I said it. Many people said it. I wasn't the only one. There's nothing special about me. I'm just following the patterns. And now we have COVID. Was COVID created? We don't really know. I believe it's possible, and I think there's some strong evidence to that. When you have the head of the Harvard biochemistry division working with Wuhan, and then he gets arrested for colluding with members of the Chinese military back in February, that's a little suspect. When back in 2015, the United States sent money over to Wuhan, $3.7 million to fund, experiments and all that kind of stuff, that's a little suspect. I'm just saying it doesn't look good. Nobody knows for sure. I'm just saying it doesn't look good when we have these types of connections. So absolutely. Let's see. Common sense. A vaccination puts a weakened or dead virus into a person. The person's defenses then fight the virus by creating antibodies. Correct? Yes. So it stands to reason that a person who gets the virus, fights it, and wins will have the antibodies necessary to prevent getting the virus again. Correct? Correct again. If these statements are true, then those who already contracted it should be safe. However, I've heard that a person can contract it more than once. Therefore, it stands to reason that the vaccination will not work. Yeah, that's just good deductive reasoning. If our own bodies that create the antibodies for this virus will be able to get that virus again, then who's to say that a vaccine that gives us the virus so we can fight it off is going to work again either? Exactly. That doesn't make sense. Now, again, I'm not going to say that there isn't a purpose for vaccinations, because polio is not floating around anymore. It's just not. So I'm not going to say that vaccines are altogether bad. I'm just concerned about what they're putting in them and their actual effectiveness. See, can you please address the fact that test results are not being counted correctly? Yeah, I think we just kind of talked about that one. In other words, if someone tests positive more than once, they are being counted as more than one person, not as one person testing positive multiple times. That is also correct from what we've seen. That's what appears to be happening. They're counting these as multiple COVID tests. And by the way, the COVID test is able to detect multiple coronaviruses. The coronavirus is a family of viruses, and the COVID-19 falls into that. So these tests aren't able to distinguish between the two. So, yes, there's a mistrust of the numbers. Now, I'll believe the best and say, hey, we're just doing the best that we can. We've never dealt with that like this before. But again, something doesn't smell right. When you can go and see that CBS News is actually putting employees from the clinic in line with their cars to make it look like there's more people coming in to get these COVID tests than not, that's a problem to me. And this is where fake news comes into play, when you're actually fabricating these things. That's a big deal. That's a lack of integrity. That's a huge lack of integrity. So there's that brings me to the next thing, is there's just a general mistrust of media. And I can say on both sides, but there's such a huge bias in the media. The media's job is just present information. Just give me the information so that we know what's going on. It's a point of accountability for those of our leadership. That's why freedom of the press is written into the Constitution. It's so that there is an entity that exists within our nation that can expose wrongdoing. And that's what they're supposed to do, just expose wrongdoing. But now there's just such a strong bias in the media, and there's evidence of media actually changing, manipulating, omitting information so they can make Trump look good or make Trump look bad. And that's difficult. I lean more towards the conservative mindset. So I'm going to favor people who have that. But we have seen it. I mean, Fox News came on and they cropped out the picture of Donald Trump, with Epstein. Why would you do that? If he was there, he was there. Just let it be what it is. But on the other side, you have the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all these people. They're just going out of their way to pump fear and promoting Black Lives Matter. They're promoting this virus. They're saying things are so horrible, all this stuff, and it just doesn't seem right. It seems like there's a very, very strong bias, and it's very difficult to put trust in that. So there's the political bias, and then I'll be quite honest. When you look at the left wing media, these are also media outlets that are advocating and heavily promoting anti-God and unbiblical principles and promoting them. So when you look at not just the news media, but media in general, the movies that are being put out, there's a strong agenda, an immoral agenda that's being put out by these people. So in my mind, if you're going to be a news media outlet that is promoting abortion, that is promoting a homosexual agenda, that is pushing for these things, it kind of makes it hard for me to trust anything you say. If you don't understand that an unborn child is a human being, it's a human life and deserves to live. If you can't understand that a man is a man, if you got 56 different genders that you can cite, I can't trust your logic. I can't trust your reasoning. I can't just trust the direction of the information that you're providing. And that's just a reality. And I'm not saying that everything they say is wrong. I'm just saying that there's enough of lies and omissions and mistruth in there to make me not trust it. Again, Trojan horse. So let's talk about masks for a minute. We still got a couple things that I want to get to. So let's talk about masks. Do they work? Well, of course they do. Of course they're not the end all be all, but they do something. They absolutely do something. Now, are they necessary? I don't think they are. I think if you're more susceptible to it, you have a weakened immune system or something like that, then by all means, use a mask. But for those of us who aren't, if you don't have diabetes, you're not obese, you don't have pulmonary heart conditions, you don't have any of those pre-existing things that make you weak, then why is everybody wearing it? And it's not 100% effective anyway. I heard someone say one thing, I'm not going to repeat it because it was a little crude, but I'll say it in a different way. If you can smell a cup of coffee through the mask, then it's not really blocking everything. Now, I understand that there's certain size of water droplets and all that, but I'm walking around watching people and they got the things on the sides. Now, it is going to stop something. So we can't say masks are completely ineffective. If they were completely ineffective, then why would doctors and nurses be wearing them all the time? That just doesn't make sense. Doctors and nurses haven't been wearing these for, decades and decades just to set us up so that we have to wear them now. That doesn't make sense. Of course, they have a level of effectiveness in stopping this stuff. We have to admit that. If you cough without a mask on and then you cough with a mask on, isn't there going to be a difference? You're definitely not going to see that spray that comes out, right? Of course. So yes, they do provide a level of protection, but the question is at this stage in the game, is that level of protection necessary to require everyone to be wearing it right now? And based on what Dr. Katz said and just common sense and what I've been feeling and what I've been seeing, I don't think so. I don't believe that they're absolutely necessary. And I want to go to our fourth clip right here of Dr. Katz speaking on this, because he talks about an aspect that we haven't talked about yet, and that is what really helps us, what is really going to get us out of this situation. So let's take a look at that right now.
Okay. I worry when I hear people talk about how we deal with this, that they leave out the immune system. I mean, obviously we know that that's a big part of it, but I feel like that gets such short shrift, and I worry that the country is going to think that the way to deal with microbes in the future is to lock yourself away, and it cannot be that. Germs are ubiquitous. They are everywhere. You can't avoid them. You have to win the battle inside. You wrote a book recently called How to Eat, which has been a pet theme of mine since I've been on television, that the main thing about our health is what we eat. And you write 80% of all chronic disease and premature death is preventable using lifestyle as a medicine. Yes, stop shaking hands, but you can't avoid germs. They're everywhere.
Yeah, so great point and a great segue. So first of all, I just want people to understand, again, I'm a physician, I do public health, I'm trained in epidemiology. It really still looks to me as it did that month ago when I wrote my piece for the New York Times, 98 to 99% of the cases of this infection are mild. Most people don't even seem to know they have it. and this is true even in the emergency department, a small portion of the cases are potentially severe. And that's what makes your point so important here, Bill. The severe cases occur in people who are old and people who are sick. Now, those two things go together, but sadly in America, they also splay apart. There are a lot of young people with coronary disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and by and large, those are diseases of lifestyle. I'm a past president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. That's what we advocate. Lifestyle is medicine because it can fix all of that.
That can be fixed. You can fix all that. It's our lifestyle choices that are the most important thing. If we take care of ourselves and respect the body that God has given us, we eat the right things, we don't overindulge, we exercise, then we don't get sick. It's really that simple. Now there are certain genetic things that you may be dealing with, but that is the exception and not the rule. Just like Dr. Katz said, 98 to 99% of the people who get this, it's just mild. Your body's strong enough to fight it out. I was watching a video with a doctor the other day, and he was just breaking it down. He was saying, look, what we need to do is take care of our bodies. We need to have more vitamin A and vitamin D because that helps strengthen the cell wall of our bodies and strengthen their ability to resist viruses that are coming in. So if we take care of ourselves, we eat right, we exercise, we get vitamin D and all those things, then we don't have to deal with that stuff. Now, I will say this. It's too late for that when the virus is here. It's too late for that. If the virus is here and all of a sudden you're going to get rid of diabetes, you're going to, lose the extra, 50 to 100 pounds and all that stuff. Look, not everybody can do that. So it's a little unreasonable to expect that people are able to just get their lifestyle in order. But this is why we have to do these things ahead of time. This is why it's so important to take care of our bodies and be healthy and strong, because healthy and strong people aren't dying from this. It's those individuals who are unhealthy, and whether that's because of lifestyle decisions or it's just because of genetic predisposition. And again, we feel for everybody. And I'm not saying their life isn't worth it because they're not healthy. Absolutely not. So don't say that. I'm saying that. And don't allow your mind to go there, because that's what we do. We get into these pockets and you'll say, oh, well, he said that those lives don't matter or whatever. No, that's not what I said. You're doing that so that you don't hear the truth of what I have to say. The truth is that when we take care of ourselves, we're healthier. I work with the homeless quite a bit, and I have a friend who's a homeless gentleman. We've known each other for years. He's a good guy, and he came by the house the other day just to visit, and I was talking with him, and I said, hey, how's this affecting the homeless community? What have you seen? Are people getting COVID? He said, have you had any friends that have had it? What's going on in the community? He looked at me and he's like, no, nobody's getting it. And that just coincides with what I've seen from being out there and feeding and talking to members of the homeless community. They're not getting it. They're not getting COVID. And I've heard this from several people. I just wanted to see it for myself. The homeless community isn't getting COVID. You know why they're not getting COVID? Let me tell you a couple reasons. Number one, they're out in the sun, so they get a lot of vitamin D. That's just the truth. When you're in the sun, you get vitamin D, and that helps strengthen your body. Number two, they're not in the most sanitary conditions, so they're constantly being exposed to germs and bacteria and viruses. That actually makes them have very strong immune systems. Their immune systems are stronger. Number two, they're not overeating. They're just not overeating. So many of them, a lot of them, don't have the excess weight. They don't have all of that stuff that's going on with a lot of America. America is still probably the most obese nation in the world. I think it's 36%, just over 36% fall into the obese category. And that's because we overindulge. And that is just a fact. It's not being insensitive. It's just the truth. It just is what it is. So you look at those factors that here's another thing. They exercise. They're walking around everywhere. So think about it. The homeless community, they're not overindulging in their food. They're not eating too much. They're out in the sun all the time. They're exposed to germs and unclean conditions always, so their immune system's exposed to it. And they're exercising all the time. And they're not getting sick, family. And by the way, none of them wear masks either. They don't wear masks. None of them wear masks. I've been out there. Ask anybody who serves the homeless. They're not wearing masks. They're not worried about that. So all that to say that there's an exploitation that's going on right now. There's some just basic common knowledge things that are being ignored, and that's why people don't trust what's going on. So I want to get to do a couple other things. Number one, let's talk about our rights. Our rights. Are our rights being violated? That's a tough question to answer. My initial reaction is yes. But let me say this. We have precedents throughout our country's history of the government having to come in and facilitate quarantines because of a viable threat, viable sickness that has come in that we need to contain and control. We don't want another Spanish flu. We don't want another Black Plague. So initially, our response, I do not think we overdid it. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't have all the answers. Let's just lock it down and be sure. So no, I don't think so. However, as time goes on and we get more information and we're understanding how this works and we start seeing the numbers that Dr. Katz was talking about here, now you're stepping outside of what's reasonable. You're stepping outside of what's reasonable. And that is a violation of our rights. You are telling people that they cannot work and provide for their families, and you have taken their ability to decide what they feel is best for their families out of their hands under the false pretense that you're putting everybody in danger, when that is not true. According to the statistics, less than 0.5% of people would be at risk, and those people are easily managed because we can see them. The elderly and those who have compromised immune systems, we can easily make provision so for 0.5% of the population, so the 99.5 can get back to work and let life happen. We had graduations canceled. They're talking about canceling entire seasons. I just heard that my son's entire basketball season might be shut down because of this. Soccer season canceled because of this. Not that that's the most important thing in the world, but I mean, come on. Is that really necessary? I don't think it's necessary at all. When you start overstepping your boundaries, then absolutely you are violating our rights. We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that should only be interrupted in the most extreme cases where there's an actual viable threat. And right now, the threat isn't as viable as we thought it was according to the numbers. That's just the reality of it. So I think our rights are being violated at this point. I absolutely think so. And another thing that's interesting to me is, why is anyone who speaks the things that Dr. Katz says or leans in that direction, why are they automatically censored and shut down on Facebook and Instagram and all these other places? Why the censorship? Why is that? Something doesn't smell right. That's all I'm going to say. Next one, is the church being persecuted? This is something that I've been very careful with this entire time. You know, from the beginning, people are saying we can't go to church. The church is being persecuted. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Here's why. If it was just the church being shut down, then I would agree with it. I would absolutely agree with it. But it's not. Store owners were shut down. Everybody was shut down. It wasn't just the church. So I don't feel like, hey, saying the church is being persecuted initially. However, again, as we move forward, it's just not sitting right with me. It's not sitting right with me. And by the way, let me preface it with this. This can't stop the Church of God. If this is all it takes to stop the Church of God, then we are way too soft. Let me tell you that right now. This isn't persecution. Go read the book of Acts again. That's why we're going through the book of Acts on Wednesday night, so you can see what real persecution is. We're not being persecuted, y'all. And even if we were, this is so light. This is so light comparing to what the church has gone through in the past and what the church is going through in other parts of the world right now. I think churches that are in Iran, churches that are on the underground in China, churches that are in India, in northeast India, that are being persecuted and even killed, and entire villages driven into the forests, those people would laugh at us for saying, oh my gosh, we have to have church online. Come on. This can't stop the church. So we have to be reasonable. When we take positions like that, we just look completely unreasonable to people. Now, I will say this. There does seem to be the beginnings of some unfair treatment. And here's what I mean by that. Initially, yes. Anytime the church comes together, you have typically larger groups of people in the same place for an extended period of time, singing and doing all that stuff. Yes, just doing simple math, there's greater opportunity for a virus to be spread. Absolutely 100%. It's true. But when we start seeing inconsistencies in how things are being treated, then I kind of start to take a look. You know, one of the things that they said was, you know, churches are no longer allowed to sing. And I know that put people in an uproar. I didn't like it either, to be quite honest, even though we're not meeting. Our church is still online. We have home churches where we have a few that are gathering and so forth as they feel comfortable. But it did seem like, okay, this is a little bit different because the gyms are still open and they get to wear masks. So everybody gets to run on the treadmill and you're breathing heavy when you're working out, far heavier than when you're just singing. But they haven't shut that down. So it does seem like, hey, we can go to the gym and work out and do all that stuff, but we can't sing in church. It just seems like we're stepping over the line a little bit. You're stepping over the line a little bit. And here's my biggest thing. You can have protests. And first of all, before I get into the protest, don't tell me that everybody had a mask at the protest. That's a lie. Well, everybody at the protest had masks. That's not true. That is not true. There were some who did, a lot who didn't, and some people were wearing masks so they can riot and loot and do all that kind of stuff. They certainly weren't 6 feet apart, and they were doing yelling and screaming for hours and running around and stuff. So, and again, I have nothing against peaceful protest. But what I'm saying is, when you can go out and protest for hours around hundreds and thousands of people even, and be right next to each other. But then in the churches, at least the churches that I know of, are practicing social distancing, they have their masks, they have hand sanitizer, they're singing for 20 minutes, and everybody's leaving, and they just want to come to worship. That seems unreasonable to me. That seems extremely unreasonable to me. So that's why I feel like that there's a little bit of singling out going on. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that if we get a bunch of people together, and again, this is outside of herd immunity and all that stuff. I'm just talking about if we're dealing with a pandemic. We don't want as many people gathering together. So I have no problem with that. So are they persecuting us? I wouldn't say this is a direct persecution, y'all. And let me say this boldly. I wish they would. I absolutely wish they would do some hardcore direct attack on the church, because maybe we would buck up a little bit, because we're a little on the squeamish side here, family. I mean, look, I'm all for it. Like, I'll be honest. I want our youth to meet. They've been meeting on Zoom, and it's getting weary not being able to get together. I think it's time that we get back together. They should let us get back together. Absolutely. So I use their rules. We're protesting sin every Wednesday night with our youth at 7:30. You want to call it a protest? We'll call it a protest. But we want the kids to be able to get together and have fun and see each other. That's an important part. Our mental and social health is an important part of our physical health. You lock people up for long, you isolate them, you feel like they feel like they can't do the things that are necessary, then depression starts setting in, suicidal thoughts start setting in. So to look out for our young teenagers who are vulnerable during this time, you bet your bottom dollar, we are getting back together and we're going to have fun. Period. Within reason. And with some protocols in place just in case. Yes. But are we being heavily persecuted? No, I do not think so. Now, could this be a precursor to stuff in the future? Absolutely. Look, y'all, we've read the end of the book. We know things don't get better. So why are we surprised when they don't? I think we should just look for every opportunity to use it to minister in whatever capacity God's given us. I've been enjoying church online. It's been great. It's been a great shift. I really miss people and I really want to see them again. But I'm not going to whine and complain. We are blessed. We still live in the greatest nation in the earth. We still have religious freedom. Nobody's knocking down our door, taking away our Bibles yet. So let's just relax. Be cool. If we can't keep our cool during this, we're in trouble when things really go down. So let's be cool. So I just wanted to answer that one. And then this last one here is end times. Is COVID-19 a sign that we are in the end times? Well, Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 24. He said that there would be wars and rumors of wars, that there would be pestilence and famines and all those things. And he said, but the end is not yet. This is the beginning of sorrows. So, yeah, we're going to see an intensification. One of the things that I've been telling people is, as a father, I have 7 children, 6 born to my wife and I, 3 of them whom I delivered myself. So when I look at the end of days, you got to look at it like a pregnancy. As you get closer to the time of delivery, those signs, those birthing pains, they get closer together and they become more intense. So that's really what we need to look at, is things like this are going to happen more frequently and be more intense as we get closer to the end of days. So is this a part of it? I think this is a Braxton Hick. If you don't know what a Braxton Hick is, that's what they call warm-up contractions. You start getting those later in your pregnancy, and your body a woman's body starts feeling the contractions at a very low level, low degree, in preparation for when it gets really intense right before the birth. So these are just Braxton Hicks, as far as what I can see in the Word. But are they going to intensify? Yes, this is the most intense pandemic thing that we've dealt with since the Spanish flu. So we're seeing an intensification. Are we going to see an increase in frequency? Probably so. Whether it's man-made or natural, we're going to see an intensification. But I think it's more of a Braxton Hick than anything. And is this a sign that we're in the end times? No, I think we're moving closer to that. I do believe Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. And there's some very pointed reasons why I'm going to be teaching about that in our church services in the next couple weeks. But with that said, let's just keep in mind, we do know this. We do know that the enemy is going to establish a one-world government. That is going to happen. We also know that there are people who are pushing for that in existence right now. We also know that there's a particular party in our nation that is given to socialism and communist mindset and wants to bring that into our nation. And that lends itself to a one-world order. Because in order for there to be a one-world order, that means there has to be absolute control. And in order for there to be a socialist communist nation, that means that you have to eliminate God. And we see that there is a particular party that has been pushing hard to eliminate God from our nation. So you eliminate God. Look at communist China, look at communist Russia. You ask anybody who lived under that, has been around that, or in any communist nation, the government has to be God for socialism to work. So we have socialists in this nation that are part of the Democratic Party. Oops, did I say that? And they are pushing to remove God so that they can set up the government as God. You got Chris Cuomo on CNN saying, you don't need help from above, it's within you. Way to go. That's exactly what Satan says. That's exactly what the Luciferians say. And we've got that coming now from the news. So we have to be aware of what's going on, but we don't need to panic. We just say, okay, we know these things are going to happen. But with that said, just because we know it's going to happen doesn't mean we just sit there and let it happen. And this is one of my concerns too, is let's not just be passive about these things. Let's stand up for what's right. Let's stand up for what's right. Yes, I know it's going to happen. But remember, we are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world, Jesus says. So that means that we have to take on those characteristics. One of the characteristics of light is that it exposes and illuminates. So we need to expose lies, expose deception, so that people can see it. So at least you can say, yeah, I know it's a lie, but I like that better. We have to expose that. That's part of the nature of being the light of the world. It's warmth and it's comfort, and it's a beacon to those who need hope, but it also exposes darkness. It does both. And one of the characteristics of salt is it is a preservative. Salt was always used to preserve things that were decaying. So part of our role as believers in the Lord Jesus Christ is to hold back the darkness and slow the decay and the rotting away of this world, so as many as possible can come to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's ultimately what our purpose is. Whatever COVID is, whatever's going on, we want to expose lies, allow there to be truth, and then save people from this perverse generation, just like the Bible talks about. So I think it's important that when we're having our conversations too, that we keep that in mind, that Christ is still Lord of all. It's not like COVID came in and dethroned Jesus. It's not like communism or socialism can come in and dethrone God. It is what it is. I'm not worried about it either way. It's really of no concern to me who wins the next election, because I know God already knew and he already made provision for it. Now I'm going to vote for who I believe is the right candidate. I'm going to stand up for the principles that I feel are going to be most in alignment with the Word of God. I'm absolutely going to stand that way. But if God sees fit to have somebody else come in and take over, I'm cool with that. I'm good either way. My happiness, my peace, my joy, my provision, my protection has never been dependent on a government. It's always been dependent on Jesus, and that will not change, ever. So we can't be so easily offended by all this stuff. We got to be able to relax and be chill and just say, hey, I got peace that surpasses all understanding in the midst of the storm. My enemies may surround me, but it doesn't matter, because the Bible says that the Lord prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. So that means that we can be in the worst possible situation where the government's all going to hell and all that, but we can sit peacefully at the table with Christ and watch it all go on around us and still be okay. So I'm not promoting passivity. I'm just promoting having a peaceful mindset in the midst of all this, and not allowing these things to get us so riled up that we lose sight of Christ. So with that, let's see if we've got any other questions, or anyone who wants to call in. Anybody have any comments? Let's see. Okay. Coronavirus is a very common virus with about 20 different strains. The main concern I have is that we are not telling people to boost their immune systems on how to do it. You know what? This was sent to me before we even addressed that. Yes, absolutely. Instead, we are separating people and keeping them in quarantine, which ultimately drops their immune system. Absolutely right. How do we inform people about how to live in a healthy way and not live in fear? The best way to do it is just to have those one-on-one conversations. Make sure that we stay healthy, and then keep people out of fear. Fear is a very real thing. And I'll be honest, that's what makes it hard for people to listen to the coronavirus and all the updates too. It's not that we're not sensitive. It's that a lot of times people are so sensitive that you almost feel like you're bullied for feeling like, we can be okay without having to wear masks everywhere. It's like, oh, you don't care about people, you're selfish. Well, sometimes we kind of feel like, well, maybe you're a little sensitive. Maybe you're a little sensitive to these things. It's been my experience in dealing with this. Those who are most worried and scared about COVID are usually the ones that are kind of worried and scared about everything. So when you have a tendency to overreact or be really worried about everything, it kind of makes people who aren't like that go, oh, well, gosh, you're just worrying just like everything else. Now, on the other side, we got to be fair, because there's some people who are super cavalier that are doing some stupid stuff right now. I just saw this article that people are having COVID parties. What kind of dumb, stupid thing is that? They're having these COVID parties, and what they're doing is they're finding somebody who has tested positive for COVID and then inviting a bunch of people over to hang around them. And then people are getting sick and somebody died. Why would you do that? That's just nonsense. That's just the other side of just way cavalier, super prideful, move. That just doesn't make any sense. But then you have these people over here that are afraid of everything. So we got to avoid the extremes. Remember, let's try and stay in that middle ground there. Let's see. It says it also it takes 800 years for viruses to jump species. So we need to create education so that people can live healthy and not be in fear. How do we get the truth out? Again, just having those conversations. That's right. It takes a long time for a virus to develop to be able to pass. So when we see it's passing from a bat or something like that, it looks like there's some people that have been involved in helping that out. Also, it concerns me that being diagnosed with COVID is being very incentivized. $13,000 for a diagnosis and $39,000 for a ventilator. This pushes people into misdiagnosing. Yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of those nurses that I talked to had told me too, is that they're diagnosing people because the federal government is paying hospitals for COVID patients. So if you're on a ventilator, there's $39,000 that they give you. There's $13,000 if you have a patient there that has COVID, and then if somebody dies, then they give you another certain amount of money because you have to handle the body a different way. So they're incentivizing people to diagnose individuals with COVID, which is completely skewing the numbers. And that is a fact. That is just something that is happening. And to be honest, it's hard to blame the doctors in the hospitals for doing that. I mean, I know some of the biggest hospitals in LA with COVID have been operating at 40%. They've been furloughing and laying off nurses. They're losing money because they can't do a lot of the other procedures that they're designed to do because of this lockdown. So if you're able to throw COVID on something and then get money from the government who caused all this to happen, I think it's wrong to lie, but I can understand where they're coming from. They shouldn't be lying at all. But you put them in a difficult position when you do that. Let's see. Elections have consequences. Voters need to be properly informed. We're seeing the results of sheep mentality and the uninformed voters. You know what? I can't disagree with you on that. We can't allow people to play our emotions. Unfortunately, human beings, we are very simple creatures, and we're easily manipulated and controlled. Very easily. You know, all we got to do, I mean, just think about going to a movie. They play some music, they have good actors that come in, and by the end of the movie, you're either sad or angry, and you're looking at life different. And all you did was go watch a movie. Those same principles apply with everything else that they're doing. It's really fantastic if you study how people are able to control the masses through media. They're absolutely able to do that. So we have to make sure that we're getting solid information. And listen, both sides are guilty of this. This whole group mentality thing is gone overboard. We got to think for ourselves here. There's certain things that it's like, look, just because your group says it doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. Why does everybody on the right believe in guns? Why does everybody on the right, believe masks aren't necessary? Why does everybody on the right feel this way? Why does everybody on the left think that global warming is a huge issue? And everybody on the left thinks that Donald Trump is a racist. And everybody on the left thinks this. It's like, look, we got to look at each individual circumstance and situation and judge it based on its own merits and make a decision so that we arrive at truth and not herd mentality. We got herd immunity, that's good. Herd mentality, not so good. So we have to be able to avoid those things, and that's why we're talking on the bridge. So we can have those conversations and really talk about it. So what's the end of all this? What's the conclusion? What are some solutions to this COVID crisis for what we can do? For what we can do as human beings. So I would say this. First and foremost, make sure you're living a healthy life. When things like this come up, it's too late to get healthy. You have been blessed with one life and one body to carry you through it. So we need to take care of that. We have to be responsible. The United States of America is one of the most obese nations in the world, and it's us being, and I'm just being honest, I'm not being insensitive. I understand that there's certain medical conditions that make people lean towards a certain way. There's different hormonal issues and different things. But what I'm saying is we have to take our health seriously. We have to make good choices. If we don't make good choices, we set ourselves up to be hurt when something like this comes in. 99% of people are able to handle this, and that's with a relatively unhealthy general population. So let's be aware of taking care of ourselves and being healthy. There have been 100-year-olds that have beat this thing. The same gentleman who came to me and told me about the homeless community and everything. He has family back east, and one of his friends' uncles is 100-something years old who has pre-existing conditions that got COVID and beat it. So just a determined will and healthy living will do you good. Let's be sensitive to those. Here's number 2. Let's be sensitive to those who lost people. People have actually lost. People have actually gone through something. It doesn't need to change our position on what we feel we need to do, but we can stop and pause and show our condolences, our concern, and our care for the individuals who have gone through something. That's an important part of what we can do. Next, let's advocate for the things that we believe in. I'm a strong advocate that we open back up. We need to open back up and make provision for people who are at the highest level of risk. We're not going to shut down every time the flu comes through. We're not going to shut down. Alcohol kills a lot of people, from diseases caused by it, from abuse that's caused by it, from DUIs and drunk driving accidents that are caused by it. Kills a lot of people. But we're not shutting it down. We just control it. So let's not shut down everything because of COVID or anything else that comes up. Let's manage it properly, and let's advocate for that. Let's write to our congressman. Let's write to our governor. Let's open this up. Let's get the economy going. And above all, let's just love each other. It's okay to have disagreements. We should have disagreements. But let's make sure that those disagreements lead to discovery, but not to disrespect. If disagreements just lead to disrespect and writing people off, that's not healthy and that's not loving. Let's keep the channels open. Let's build the bridges so we can come together and have reasonable conversations and talk about things that are true and find truth together. Remember, that's ultimately what we're building a bridge to, from where we're at to truth. And let me tell you this. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through him. He is the ultimate bridge to bring us from where we are to our ultimate resting place in him. And that's what I want to leave you all with. No matter what goes on here on earth, there's a promise that we have for eternal life in Christ. If you don't know him, I invite you to come to get to know him. Go find a church just to see. Read the Bible just to see. I'd invite you to join us in my church online. I'm not going to post it on here or anything. You can find me. You know where we're at. But I just want to encourage everybody. Let's stick close to Jesus. Let's keep our eyes focused on him. And as we do that, everything's going to be okay. So that is it for the bridge tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And until I see you next week. Oh wait, time out. I was about to cut out before making the announcements. Remember, starting in August, we are going to 2 videos during the week, and then our live broadcast on Sunday. So every Tuesday and Friday, beginning in August, we're going to have a 10 to 15 minute video during the week that talks about the subject we'll be discussing on Sunday. So if it was COVID, then we'll have a video that talks about one aspect on Tuesday, another one that talks about it on Thursday, so then we can come together and have an overall conversation in this forum on Sunday. So I want to invite you guys to be on the lookout for that. Don't forget, we're also going to be moving to a strictly YouTube-based show. So right now we're broadcasting on Facebook Live and on YouTube. However, to keep things simpler for me and be able to respond and set some things up differently so we can have more real-time interaction, we're going to be going just to YouTube. So that also begins in August. So make sure you go to my YouTube channel, The Bridge by Jesse Bailey. Subscribe, hit the bell so when videos come out, you know that it's there. And then until then, we're going to be here every Sunday. And then August 2nd, we're going to be doing it live Sundays and then Tuesday, Thursday. So with that, family, God bless you guys. I love you all. I pray that tonight blessed you. And until I see you again, keep it bold, keep it balanced, and keep it biblical. Have a great night.
Papa said build a bridge, must subtract the division. Discernment dictate decisions, relationship and religion. All these days to be balanced, seen the world so cold. Leaders barely being biblical, boys afraid to be bold. Ain't the Jesus I know, all praise to the chief, one and only high priest. Son of God with the keys. Price of life ain't cheap. Paid in blood, not clean. Wanna cross over water, follow what he taught us, start walking. I'ma go build a bridge. Yeah, he said build a bridge. A lot of tensions on the side.